Good evening to everyone. This evening we have in our presence the Honourable Mario Michel, Justice of Appeal of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Honourable Michel was born in St. Lucia on the 19th of January, 1960. He graduated from the University of the West Indies in Barbados in 1982 with a Bachelor of Laws degree with honors, and then moved to the Hugh Wooding Law School in Trinidad, from where he graduated in 1984 with a legal education certificate. Upon graduation from law school in 1984, the Honourable Mario Michel returned to St. Lucia and commenced private practice as a lawyer. In 1990, he established the law firm of Michel and Company, which he headed until 1987, when he discontinued his legal practice to serve in government. In January 2007, upon his retirement from active politics, after a promised decade of service in that arena, he assumed private practice as a lawyer. On the 1st of September 2009, he was appointed as a judge of the High Court of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and assigned to the territory of Antigua and Barbuda, where he served until September 2012, when he was elevated to the Court of Appeal. His Lordship, the Honourable Mario Michel, is now based at the headquarters of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court in Castries, St. Lucia, from where he travels to the 9 member states and territories of the Supreme Court hearing appeals, along with the Chief Justice and the 3 other Justices of Appeal from the Magistrates' Courts and High Courts of the member states and territories. He is married and is the father of 2 children, Marie Grace and Fidel Michel. I hope that I'm pronouncing the M-I-C-H-E-L. You realize I paused.
You keep putting a T that's not.
T, yeah, it's
Michel.
It's Michel, right? So it's more like French. Yes, yeah. Michel. Okay, so I do apologize. So the Honourable Mario Michel. Let's welcome him with a lusty round of applause.
Thank you, Khadijah. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, St. Kitts Nevis, Honourable Minister, Belize, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. When I was asked to deliver the keynote address at this conference, my initial response was a negative one. Not because public speaking was something with which I was unaccustomed, nor because youth development was something in which I was uninterested. My negative response was instead the product of a feeling of being overburdened with work at this time, combined with a feeling of being outdated on the subject at this time. What is it, I immediately thought, that I could carry with me to a conference on youth development in 2015, approaching 3 decades after exiting the leadership of my country's youth movement, and nearly a decade after exiting the policy leadership at the governmental level of the sector of youth in my country. More so, some 6 years after becoming immersed in the cloistered realm of the upper judiciary of the Eastern Caribbean. What indeed could I carry with me from which my listeners could partake that they had not already surfeited on in the course of the no doubt extensive research and reflection on the subject by one group of participants, or in the course of their current involvement in youth work by another group of participants? Since I could not then think of anything worthy of sharing, I respectfully declined the invitation with full explanation. But when I thought that I had given a reasoned and reasonable response in the negative to the person by whom I was approached to do the address, it appeared that she had decided that I was going to do the keynote address, and no was not really an option. Instead of accepting my declination, she built a case for my delivering the keynote address on a foundation which I had laid in my explanation, and she put it to me that it was not just my previous involvement in the youth movement, but what I had done since then that made me suitable for the task. So that the approach to me to do the keynote address had more, I understood from her, to do with the historicity of my involvement than with its currency. And I bought that line, sold to me by Dr. Gilbert Roberts, without any prior warning given to me that I would have to address a forum that might include academics, representatives of regional and international agencies, youth workers, and youth leaders, all versed in the contemporary theories informing the dialogue on youth development locally, regionally, and internationally, and which I, by now a dinosaur in the field, might be expected by my audience to expatiate on. When, after some discussion with Dr. Gilbert Roberts, and upon receipt of the first draft of the program, I realized what I had gotten myself into, I thought that there was enough time for me to research and reflect on the subject, acquaint myself with the contemporary theories and practices in the field, and then, having been so refreshed, exert some intellectual energy in preparing and delivering a keynote address deserving of its designation. But when I returned to St. Lucia last week from the week-long sitting of the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal in Grenada and dealt with several matters arising, and then I started to prepare for this trip to Jamaica without having had a chance to do any prior research and without even deciding by then on the topic of my address, I realized that I would have to unleash the dinosaur. So, Dr. Gilbert Roberts, if you still insist on me giving you a title for my keynote address, then I'm afraid that you will have to title this one, Been There, Done That. Because what I propose to do here is not to explore and espouse on the theories on youth development which have emerged in the last decade whilst I have been completely off the scene, and on which, in any event, most of you are better informed than I am, but instead to walk you through the path that I took to, through, and from the youth movement of my country, in the hope that you will recognize the vehicle which transported me along the most critical parts of that journey, and why it is this type of vehicle which should drive the agenda for youth development in the region beyond 2015. So take off your academic caps and gowns, your office wear and institutional garbs, or your youthful treads and fashions, and put on your field clothes, whilst I will notionally shed my judicial attire to walk you through the path. What better place to start than at the beginning? My earliest significant recollections were from 1970, when at the age of 10 I entered the all-boys St. Mary's College Secondary School. I recall then organizing football and cricket matches among the young boys in my neighborhood and initiating discussions among them on age-appropriate subjects at the time. At St. Mary's College, I also organized similar sporting encounters and organized as well reading and discussion sessions among the more intellectually curious boys, so that we would stay back after school once or twice a week and somewhere on the extensive school grounds gather to do collective reading and discussion of the writings of and about Martin Luther King, Jr., Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Angela Davis, and the Soledad Brothers, and others. Just as an aside, we called our reading and discussion group the Black Buddy Boys, but I have no recollection of where this somewhat off-sounding name of our revolutionary group came from. I do recall, however, that one of our major field activities was to gently clout all white boys in the school every Black Friday, singly or collectively, depending on the size of the victim. This, I believe, was our misguided manifestation of Black Power. I also recall that we collected a weekly contribution of 10 cents from each member of the group and banked it every Friday. But when in December of 1973, we had a huge sum of money, not sufficient to finance the revolution, but too much we thought to just keep in the bank, we withdrew our entire $48 from the bank and had a party. At the party, some boys got girls and some got drunk, resulting in the demise of the group after the majority of the members, just at the stage of life when their hormones were starting to get busy, realized that they preferred either girls or bears to readings and discussions about Black Power. Back on course. The seeds which were sown in these early years continued to germinate in my teens, and I got involved in more youth and student activities in these years, culminating in 1978 with my representation of St. Lucia at the 11th World Festival of Youth and Students. In 1978, I also entered the University of the West Indies and continued then and through the early 1980s my involvement in youth and student activities and participated in regional and international youth and student activities in Barbados, Trinidad, Grenada, Guyana, and as far afield as Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Soviet Union. Then in 1984, I graduated from the U Wooding Law School and was called to the bar in St. Lucia and commenced my law practice. I could then have just settled into my law practice, make plenty money, and forget about the rest of my country's youth. But the seeds which were sown and germinated in the 1970s and early 1980s were fertilized in the mid-80s by the heightened interest in youth activities generated by the designation of the United Nations of 1985 as International Youth Year and the organizing of two major international gatherings of youth in that year, the 12th World Festival of Youth and Students in the Soviet Union and a rival US-sponsored festival right here in Jamaica, resulting in the end in my becoming involved in the mobilization of young people across St. Lucia and culminating in the establishment of the St. Lucia National Youth Council on April 14, 1985, with me as its president and Mr. Henry Charles right here with us as the PRO. I remained in the leadership of the NYC for 4 years, in the course of which a lot of hard work was put in. Funds were forthcoming from several agencies and organizations, including the Caribbean Conference of Churches, Oxfam UK, Bread for the World from the US, CUSO International from Canada, and HEVOS from Holland. And the NYC was programming heavily and advocating vigorously for the youth of St. Lucia. In the process, a generation of conscious and confident young persons emerged from the programming and advocacy of the NYC in this period, several of whom have gone on to make significant contributions to St. Lucia and the region. In the first half of the 1990s, by which time I was no longer in the leadership of the NYC, the Council continued its programming and advocacy while I moved into other activities at the national level, including becoming involved in the re-establishment of the St. Lucia Guild of Graduates and serving as president of the Guild, then becoming president of the St. Lucia Bar Association and commencing a process of revitalization of the association before demitting office to plunge into the murky waters of elective politics. To be clear, the call to me by the stakeholders of the sectors served by these organizations to take leadership of the revival and revitalization of the organizations had everything to do with the reputation earned and skills learned in the leadership of the National Youth Council. In the second half of the 1990s, I had transitioned to mainstream politics, not as a result of personal ambition, I would say, but again as a result of persistent calls on me by others, becoming in the process the deputy leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party in 1996, being elected in 1997 as the parliamentary representative of the Groselade district, and being appointed then as leader of government business in the House of Assembly, and Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Education, Human Resource Development, Youth and Sports. My ministerial portfolios, all deliberately chosen, put me in charge of the sectors in respect of which the NYC had advocated over the years, both during my leadership of the Council and in the years following. From my position as Minister with responsibility for these key portfolios, I sought to do all of the major things in education, human resource development, youth, and sports that the National Youth Council had been calling on government to do in its 12 years of existence thus far. Among the highlights were the following. 1. The preparation of, presentation to, and passage by Parliament of the St. Lucia National Youth Council Incorporation Act, giving official and formal recognition to the Council as the representative body of youth in St. Lucia. 2. The payment of an annual government subvention to the now officially recognized National Youth Council. 3. The appointment of youth representatives, mostly nominated by the NYC, to the boards of most of the major statutory corporations in St. Lucia. 4. The replacement of what was previously the Youth and Sports section of the Youth and Community Division in the Department of Community Development, Social Affairs, Youth and Sports, with a Department of Youth and Sports, headed at first by a Director of Youth and Sports, and then later by its own Permanent Secretary. 5. The formulation in collaboration with the National Youth Council, and after extensive consultations with youth throughout the country, of a national youth policy formally adopted by the Parliament of St. Lucia in 2003. 6. The holding of an annual youth awards ceremony to honor and award youth who made outstanding contributions in their clubs, their communities, and in various fields outside of sports, since there had already been in existence an annual sports awards ceremony. 7. The presentation to and passage by Parliament of the National Lotteries Authority Act, empowering the authority to conduct the operation of all lotteries in St. Lucia, and dedicating of all the funds from the lottery operations to youth and sports programs only. 8. The establishment of major national and community sporting facilities that NYC had long advocated for, including a national track and field and football stadium and a national cricket stadium. 9. An increase in the range and sources of scholarships available to young people to embark on tertiary education. And 10. The introduction of universal secondary education in St. Lucia, providing a place in secondary school to every child leaving primary school, where previously less than 50% of primary school leavers had the possibility of attending secondary school. These undertakings by government during my tenure as minister, all of which had been advocated for over the years by the NYC, helped to validate and vindicate the mission and mandate of the Council, and contributed, no doubt, to its longevity. And by the way, Amilcar, I could never have accomplished most of these things for the youth of St. Lucia, had I not combined with the portfolio of youth these other portfolios which put me in charge of the major areas on which the NYC had advocated for over the years. After 10 years on the political front line, between 1996 and 2006, I returned to my law practice, only to be called on within 2 years of my return to serve on the bench as a High Court judge. Then, after 3 years as a High Court judge, I was elevated to the Court of Appeal of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. The call to service in the judicial sphere and the smoothness of the transition from the partisanship of politics to the impartiality of the judiciary had everything to do with my prior years of service in the youth movement, civil society generally, and national leadership in the governmental sphere, not least of which was my leadership of the NYC and of the sectors of government directly involving youth. As my own career progressed, so did the National Youth Council. Though the Council had its highs and lows, ups and downs, it has never once become dormant, and it marches on over 30 years after its establishment in April 1985. Several leaders in business, in the public services, in civil society, and in government in St. Lucia, and in various regional and international agencies came through the ranks of the St. Lucia National Youth Council. One can mention Mr. Henry Charles, a former regional director of the Commonwealth Youth Program and now an international youth development specialist. Mr. Armstrong Alexis, also a former regional director of CYP and now deputy representative of the UNDP in Suriname. Mr. Henry Mangal, operations manager of the UNDP office for Barbados and the OECS. Dr. Ernest Hilaire, former CEO of the West Indies Cricket Board and now St. Lucia's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. And Mr. Wayne Vitalis, the financial controller at the CARICOM Development Fund in Barbados. School principals, permanent secretaries, and other heads of department, government ministers, diplomats, lawyers, doctors, engineers, and other professionals emerged from the ranks of the National Youth Council, and many of them will tell you the tremendous impact which the NYC had in molding and motivating them. Now, if I have been able to hold leadership positions in all three branches of government after exiting the leadership of the St. Lucia National Youth Council, if so many other young persons from St. Lucia have attained so much after going through the ranks of the NYC, and if the NYC itself has been able to survive and thrive for over 30 unbroken years, then there are lessons to be learned from the St. Lucia youth experience which can help to shape an agenda for youth development in the Caribbean post-2013. Before offering some lessons from my St. Lucia experience, I want to make it clear that this chronicling of my activities from 1970, by taking you on a walk with me along my traveled path, was intended not to impress you, or to tire you for that matter, but to illustrate that when a spark is lit and finds a combustible vessel to carry it, it can start a fire that will incinerate the apathy, lethargy, and indifference both of and about youth, which can retard the forward movement of an entire sector of society which might otherwise produce some of the leading contributors in every sphere of national life. I propose now to offer you 10 lessons which I believe the St. Lucia youth experience can provide to anyone interested in youth development in the Caribbean. 1. Youth programs must be undertaken by youth and not for youth. There are numerous programs being undertaken throughout the Caribbean which are intended to benefit the youth of the region, but they are mostly undertaken by other persons, many with the best intentions, but who are outside of the age range of youth and outside of the belief and value systems of the region's youth. These programs are being undertaken for the youth, but not by the youth. The experience in St. Lucia is that although we sought and obtained resources from various agencies and utilized resource persons with the required expertise from within or without the sector of youth, the programs of the St. Lucia National Youth Council were conceptualized, organized, and undertaken by the membership and leadership of the NYC, all of whom were from the sector of youth. We remained always in the cockpit and never allowed ourselves to become mere passengers on the flight to the future of our youth. 2, the voices of youth must be heard and heeded on matters affecting them if the youth are to realize their true potential. Opportunities must be provided to the youth of the countries of the Caribbean to speak and be heard on issues affecting them, and their views and positions, when expressed, must be factored into the decision-making process on all issues which significantly impact on them. I well recall my exhortation to the youth of St. Lucia early in the life of the National Youth Council, that the NYC must be the vehicle which will transport the ideas and positions of youth from the street corners in their various communities to the high roads of power and decision-making in the country, from the playing fields in their districts to every field of endeavor in our country. Many might at the time have considered these exhortations to be the exaggerated expectations of an idealist, but some at least may have been around to see the drivers and passengers of that vehicle be transported to many destinations of power and influence in St. Lucia, carrying with them some of the ideas and positions formulated and fashioned, sometimes on the street corners and playing fields, and defined and refined in the clubhouses, school halls, community centers, and other venues where young people gathered to share ideas with and learn from each other through the programs and activities organized by the National Youth Council and its branches and affiliates around the country. 3, youth should be regarded as problem solvers and not as problems to be solved. The capacity and sagacity displayed by young persons in St. Lucia in solving problems and resolving issues when entrusted with a responsibility and equipped with the resources to do so belies the perception often held by others that they need to address and solve not just the problems of youth, but the problem of youth. We must never allow the inability and irresponsibility of the few to shape our view of the many young persons who are out there addressing not just the problems of youth, but the problems of society generally, often at times brought about by persons beyond the age of youth. 4, youth should be regarded as assets in the process of national development and not as liabilities to the process. The experience in St. Lucia with most of the youth representatives on the boards of statutory corporations and on other platforms of national decision-making clearly demonstrate that when placed on the positive side of the balance sheet in the accounting for national development, the contribution of the youth to the process of national development has been of immense value, while the same cannot always be said of those from other sectors of society. Of course, when you throw into the mix the contributions made by youth in sports and in culture, the asset value of youth is made more manifest. And if you have any doubts about that, just focus for a while on the current age of Usain Bolt and the pantheon of international track and field stars coming from Jamaica, and on the ages at the time they made their mark internationally of Bob Marley and the trailer load of renowned Jamaican reggae artists. All of these sporting and cultural greats of Jamaica and the Caribbean were Jamaican youth at the height of their contributions to the process of national and regional development in Jamaica and the Caribbean. 5, young people do not need charity, they need opportunity. Sometimes we might think that given the rate of youth unemployment in our region at present, given the increasing prevalence of suicide by young persons, given the level of criminal activity involving youth, both as perpetrators and victims, that young people need the sympathy of or charity from the older folk. But what young people need are opportunities for self-development and self-actualization that would help to reduce the incidence of youth unemployment, youth suicide, youth crime, and other manifestations of self-destructive behaviors, which are sometimes the unwanted children of the marriage of the neglect of youth issues and of the unfavorable social and economic conditions inimical to the progress and advancement of our youth. Our own experience in St. Lucia is that at the height of the NYC's programming, when funds were available to employ field staff and to undertake numerous youth programs, and when there was at the time a greater emphasis on providing employment and other opportunities for youth, the incidence of serious youth indiscipline and significant youth criminality was very much less than it is at present. So yes, our youth need a hand in the creation of opportunities for them, not a handout in the dispensation of charity to them. 6, significant development of youth as a sector and significant contribution by the sector of youth to the development process must, in the Caribbean context, be built on a foundation of national youth councils or national youth organizations by whatever name called, determining and directing youth programs in their respective territories. Interventions by regional and international agencies do assist in highlighting youth issues and identifying approaches to address them. But these interventions can at best be plasters on the wounds rather than medication to heal them. It is the youth and their organizations which alone can heal the wounds of youth, whether self-inflicted or inflicted by the violence of neglect of the issues and concerns of youth. Thus will emerge a well-heeled and well-prepared body of persons ready to not only engender their own development, but to contribute as well to the development of the region. 7, the membership and leadership of the National Youth Council must consist of youth, however defined. There are varying definitions of youth in the Caribbean, with the minimum age being as low as 10 or 12 in some countries and as high as 35 in some. In St. Lucia, the age definition of youth in the Constitution of the NYC as persons between the ages of 15 and 30 was derived from the UN's Declaration of 1985 as International Youth Year. The Constitution in St. Lucia, however, permits persons over the age of 30 to be involved in the Council if they belong to a member organization of the Council. There ought, however, to be a regionally established definition of the age range of youth, which should be used by all national youth councils in the Caribbean and by all agencies and organizations, whether local, regional, or international, dealing with Caribbean youth. And it is from persons in the defined age range that the membership and leadership of the National Youth Councils must emerge. 8, national youth councils must be democratically established and organized. The membership of the National Youth Councils ought, as far as possible, to include youth from the various geographic areas and regions of their countries, and from the various social and political groupings in the countries. Unless there is a specific reason based on special circumstances, no properly constituted youth group, if the membership of the NYC consists of youth groups, or no youth desirous of participating in the work and programs of the Council and willing to abide by its rules and regulations, if the membership is on an individual basis, ought to be excluded from the National Youth Council. 9. National Youth Councils, once properly constituted, must be provided with financial and institutional support to enable them to execute programs for and on behalf of the youth in their countries. To this end, funds and other resources intended for youth programs should be made available to the National Youth Councils to undertake the youth programs and not to agencies and organizations seeking to program for youth. You know, there's a considerable amount of financial and other resources available to regional and international agencies and organizations, both governmental and private, for undertaking programs intended to benefit youth. But even with the best will in the world, and with all of the training and expertise which make for good CVs, the workers and volunteers within these agencies and organizations can do no more than touch the surface, but can never get to the core of youth development in the Caribbean. It is the National Youth Councils and the regional collective which must be recognized and resourced to determine and direct youth programming in the region, either through direct funding or with youth-led partnership arrangements with the entities holding the funds. 10. National Youth Councils, well organized and well supported, can conduce to the emergence of a cadre of competent and confident citizens making meaningful and decisive contributions to their countries. This was our experience in St. Lucia, and I know that it was the experience as well of some of the other territories in the region where there were vibrant youth and national youth councils functioning well over a period of time. These are just some of the do's and don'ts derived from the St. Lucia experience, which I believe offer valuable lessons to anyone engaged in or concerned about youth development in the Caribbean. You would no doubt have gathered from my enunciation and enumeration of the lessons to be learned from the St. Lucia youth experience that I am an ardent supporter of and believer in national youth councils made up of youth in their membership and leadership. I recall fondly the days when we had active national youth councils in St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, St. Kitts, Nevis, Montserrat, Anguilla, Barbados, and St. Martin, when we liaised and learned from each other, when we came together under the umbrella of the Caribbean Federation of Youth to do youth programming at the regional level, and when we had the benefit of funding from regional and international agencies which treated the sector of youth as a major priority sector in Caribbean society. I recall, sadly, the deprioritizing of youth as a sector of society by most of the external agencies from which funding was obtained for youth programming. I recall, too, the increasing official indifference to youth issues, fueled in part, I believe, by an ideological shift in the region as the decade of the 90s was nearing an end, which brought in its wake laissez-faire approaches by government in the region to the management of national affairs, with the resources of NGOs like National Youth Councils being deleted from the national agenda. I recall the resulting under-resourcing of youth programs, leading eventually to the decline of some and the demise of other national youth councils in the Caribbean. St. Lucia had the good fortune of a supportive government, prepared to recognize, resource, and empower the National Youth Council, precisely at a time when other councils in the region were losing external support. Thus was kept flying in St. Lucia the flag of the St. Lucia National Youth Council, which, by its institutionalization at a critical juncture, has been able to weather the storms that threaten it from time to time. Indeed, it is difficult now to follow events in St. Lucia over even a brief period of time, let's say a week, and not hear or hear of the National Youth Council somewhere in the mix. Of course, the role played by people like Timothy Ferdinand, a former outspoken and well-spoken president of the St. Lucia National Youth Council, now the outgoing chairman of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council, cannot be underestimated. And I can tell you in all honesty, the pride that I have felt when hearing voices like his articulate on and advocating for the issues of youth in my country on behalf of the NYC. Over a decade, that is, after I was involved in its establishment. So, Timothy, if you had not known of this before, these are my honestly held views of you and your 4 years in the leadership of an organization which is still dear to me because I know what it did for me and for the thousands of other young people in St. Lucia who were exposed to the NYC at some time during its 30 years of programming for youth. So although Mr. Henry Charles, on the evidence of the article co-authored by him in the special issue of Social and Economic Studies on the subject of youth, appears to have embraced and become immersed in the new thinking on the approaches to youth development in the Caribbean, complete with the new jargon virtually unrecognizable to the Caribbean's youth leaders of the 1980s and 1990s, he will, I'm sure, tell you that neither he nor I would have been here today had there not been a St. Lucia National Youth Council and had we not been involved in its establishment and leadership. I'm also of the view that Armstrong Alexis, a former Vice President and General Secretary of the NYC, Henry Mangal, a former President of NYC, Ernest Hilaire, also a former Vice President and General Secretary of NYC, and Wayne Vitalis, a former executive member of the student branch of the NYC, all of whom I mentioned earlier, might not have been holding and handling well the offices that they hold or have held in major regional or international organizations had they too not been exposed to and involved in the NYC and played a part in the leadership of it. And do not take my word for it. Ask any of them. When this session is over, ask Mr. Henry Charles, and they will tell you no less. And you may just get similar sentiments expressed by the current Minister for External Affairs and International Trade in St. Lucia, Honourable Alva Baptiste, the current Minister for Youth Development and Sports, Honourable Sean Edwards, and the current Minister and current Parliamentary Secretary for Tourism and Creative Industries in St. Lucia, Honourable Lorne Theophilus and Senator Kentry Jean-Pierre, all of whom were exposed to and involved in the St. Lucia National Youth Council in their formative years. Of course, I do not want you to take my words spoken here this evening, extolling, as intended, the centrality of national youth councils to the process of youth development and in contributing to regional development in the Caribbean, as downplaying the significance of the role played by the regional intelligentsia in researching and writing about youth issues in the region, or the contributions of regional and international agencies, especially CYP and the various UN agencies, in coordinating and sponsoring programs intended to benefit youth. Without the work done by the persons and organizations mentioned, the priority still accorded to youth as a sector may well have dissipated by now. Indeed, one only has to look at the quality of the program of and participants at this conference and the rich content which is likely to emerge from it to appreciate the value of the work of the regional academics and the regional and international agencies engaged in the organizing, facilitating, and/or sponsoring of the conference. But valuable though their work undoubtedly is, its impact will be stymied if there are not the vehicles equipped to transport that work to its intended destination in the arena of youth development. And a lot of the resources expended to do youth work in the region by the regional and international agencies may very well be better spent by or in partnership with the National Youth Councils, or where appropriate, the Regional Youth Council. I also want it to be noted that I am aware of the establishment, through the instrumentality of the Commonwealth Youth Programme, of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council, under new leadership, I believe, as of Tuesday. I am aware that the CRYC has received some funding support towards its establishment, which I hope will metamorphose into program support and will continue into the medium and long term. But I note that most of the vibrant NYCs of the golden era, what I consider to be the golden era, which led the establishment during that period of the Caribbean Federation of Youth as an umbrella body of the NYCs in the region, are not part of the CRYC, mostly because they demised in the 1990s and in the first decade of this century through lack of funding and other material and institutional support. In fact, most of the member organizations of CRYC appear to be new kids on the regional youth scene, with the Guyana National Youth Council, for instance, being still in its embryonic stages when the CRYC was born, and with some of the member organizations of the CRYC not being national youth councils. CRYC must strive to hold together its existing member councils, assist in the resolution of the legitimacy issues which the councils in Guyana and Trinidad appear, at least from what I saw on the website, to have been having at home, seek to have its member organizations in Barbados, Antigua, and Barbuda and St. Kitts develop international youth councils, and work towards the revitalization or revival of the now inactive or defunct, once vibrant national youth councils in the Caribbean. Lest it be thought that I am overstating the case for resources for youth programming to be provided to and utilized by the youth organizations themselves, and not to and by well-intentioned others, just remember the generations of women who lived through several unsuccessful attempts by well-meaning men to liberate them. But when the women took charge of their own affairs and got the resources to do their own programming, the women's movement took off and landed the women of the Caribbean with all of the top jobs in almost every sphere of society, including the judiciary, leaving mostly to the men the messy business of politics. I should say, too, that notwithstanding my earlier categorization of myself in terms of the contemporaneity of my knowledge of and involvement in matters of youth, I do not wish you to be misled into thinking that I am not conscious of the drastic changes in both the modes of communication and the language of communication that have taken place in the last 3 decades. So that, for instance, the need for a youth leader today to drive or bus to the several communities around the country where youth would normally assemble to dialogue on the issues affecting them is considerably reduced now by the ability to dialogue on various social media platforms without anyone leaving his or her location, and that yesterday's landscape on which youth interacted is today's youthscape. But whether the communication is direct or digital, and whether the terminology is youth participation in decision-making or democratic inclusion of youth, the major problems of youth remain unaffected either by the changed terminology or the changed technology. Ladies and gentlemen, my call this evening to the youth leaders and youth workers here assembled is to get involved and stay involved in the difficult but rewarding task of working towards the establishment, resuscitation, and sustenance of national youth councils in our Caribbean and the regional collective of national youth councils. Ensure that the membership and leadership of these organizations are from the sector of youth, and that they cater to the diversity of youth in the Caribbean. To the regional academics and other custodians, collaborators with, colleagues of, or consultants to the custodians of the keys to unlock the resources required for the youth leaders and youth workers to carry out their task. My call to you is to let the doors be opened and let the resources be released and to find their way to the national and regional youth organizations, which alone can engender sustainable youth development in the Caribbean beyond 2015, and which alone can enable the region's youth to play their role in the sustainable development of the Caribbean post-2015. And if, in the course of this address, I did not sound as impartial as judges are expected to be, then maybe it is because I am partial, as leaders of the youth movement, past and present, should be, to the National Youth Councils, which nurtured and nourished so much of the potential that was realized in those of us who contributed to and benefited from the programs and activities of the National Youth Council in our country. As I and so many others have benefited from the councils that were and are, so too are those now involved, poised to benefit from the councils that are and will be, with the support of the regional and international agencies and organizations represented here, and the participation of youth in the programs and activities of the NYCs. And it is this intercourse between supporting agencies and organizations and representative national and regional youth councils which will produce the offspring of youth development in the Caribbean. Let me close here by thanking the organizers of this conference for their demonstration of confidence in me by inviting me and insisting that I be the keynote speaker at this conference, and by thanking all of you for affording me a patient hearing. I thank you.
Okay. And thank you very much, Honourable Michel, for that very informative, inspiring speech. And I want to thank you as well for taking the invitation on behalf of the committee, the conference committee. Thank you very much for taking up on the invitation to deliver this feature presentation. So let's give him another round of applause, please. At this time, we're going to open the mic for 2 questions, just 2. Yeah? So could you be very concise, to the point?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Xander Daisy. I'm from St. Lucia, representing Minister Michel, as Justice of Appeal. I asked this question last night, but then I wasn't answered. I'm very persistent. What do you think about the war on drugs in the Caribbean and the impact it has on our young men? And what do you think is the way forward? The directions for sustainable development in the Caribbean? I'm really paying attention to the theme. What do you think is the way forward for us here in the Caribbean as it pertains to the war on drugs? Thank you.
So we'll take the questions all at once and then he will answer. So do we have another question? Yes?
So yes, just thank you very much for the presentation. I think that presentation should probably be shared more widely to many of our ministries of both governments. I think because I think the lessons learned I think are quite interesting. Would be, I think, very useful to many of our countries. What happened, this is a history question, I'm not very clear. What happened to the Federation? What is it that has happened to the Federation? And that's the other question. I want to know what happened there. And I mean, maybe some lessons are to be learned there, especially for the current regional body as we're trying to put that together. And then I want to also think what has happened then more globally. You talk about the movements in Russia and the world coming together in 85 and all those times. And I'm still struggling because I think at the international level we're still not seeing the groundswell from national to regional and then to international levels to interface with the UN and other agencies. So there's almost a systemic breakdown all the way down. And now I think what we have at that large international level is something that I don't think any of us have really recognized. I know there has been attempts for the World Assembly on Youth. All these institutions were there around the same time, but I think there's been a breakdown. So probably you could share some thoughts on why you think that has happened, but particularly what has happened in the Caribbean with the Federation.
We will take one other question. Don't forget to say your name, country, and who you represent.
Okay, my name is Patricia. Born in Jamaica, but I live in Toronto, Canada. I enjoyed your speech tremendously. My question for you is, what role do you see young people like myself who belong to the diaspora playing in this youth movement in the Caribbean?
Thank you.
Okay, so the Honourable Michel will take your question. Go ahead.
Thank you. I've heard a lot during this conference from a number of younger persons, and there is a bemoaning of a fact, maybe, of an inability for young persons to not only be engaged, but to engage the process of development. And I wonder if there are geopolitical experiences that deny that, even within a regional experience here. And then my other thought would be, is there perhaps an explanation or the possibility of a need for young people engaging the process of their own transformation relative to the needs that exist? So for instance, all of what happened in the Middle East and so on, when young people rose up to respond to what was the crisis of their time, perhaps it is not yesterday's organization of the NYC, but perhaps there needs to be a new thinking, because young people communicate differently. The platforms on which the discourse is happening is a different space. The word revolution has been heard in this conference. Is there room for a new kind of dispensation that would describe how young people organize, whether they're rural or urban, and how they actually can engage? Or should we be expecting the same kind of formations of young people for the needs today?
Okay, so thank you for your questions. We'll now hear from Honourable Michel.
Try to be okay if I sit to answer.
Turn on your mic.
Yes, starting to the issue of the resolution of the problem of drug abuse. I think if any of us were to come up with an answer to resolve that problem, then you probably would get the Nobel Prize in every discipline. Because improvement, in fact, it is an issue that has been studied from every angle, from the medical, psychological, psychiatric, social. It is a very studied problem that in the end, quite unfortunately, no one has been able to come up with the answer to. Countries deal with it in their own special ways. The United States, for instance, invests a lot of money in the coast guards or semi-coast guards of the Caribbean and other territories where to prevent, sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that there's some benevolence on their part, when really all it is to prevent the drugs from being transcribed to them. That's basically what it is all about, and that is, if you like, principally the American approach. Stop it from coming in, so that we can lessen the incidence of drug use in our own territory. In every country, as I said, different solutions, different ways have been attempted to resolve the issue. I mean, in some of the Middle Eastern countries, you might lose your life for becoming associated with the consumption, trafficking of illegal drugs. So, I mean, it is not not a question that anyone is capable of off the cuff coming up with an answer to. It's something that young people, particularly having regard to the extent to which they have been affected by the problem, must continue to work towards encouraging, motivating, inspiring other young persons to stay away from drugs. One of my constant messages when I address young people, and a message that I've been sounding from the time I first got involved in the youth movement, is to stay away from the temptation to get involved in the consumption, trafficking, or in any other way with hard and soft drugs, because at the end you are bound to regret it. It will do nothing but harm to you, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise. It is a message that the youth groups, the youth councils around the region must continue to sound. Never get tired of sounding it. Don't think, well, yeah, they've heard that already, or yeah, well, say it, pound it, non-stop. Because otherwise we will continue to lose the battle that we have been waging as societies, as countries, as the world even, the battle against drug abuse. It's easy, one can think, to get discouraged by the apparent lack of progress, to say, well, the very fact we've been fighting it for decades that we have not come up with a solution is no reason to be despondent and to give up. It is one of those things that will be with us constantly, and all we can do is continuously, unfailingly fight it by inspiration, by information, by any means that are available to us, particularly young people. And I say us, I say us and I say young people in the same sentence. Maybe because just the fact of my speaking about the issues tonight have brought me back into a zone where I was several years ago. But yes, that is the only answer that I can realistically come up with at this time in examining the question of the solution to the drug problem of youth in the Caribbean and elsewhere. The CFY issue as to what happened to the Caribbean Federation of Youth, my information is that it demised, maybe 5 or more years ago. It was started in the heyday of the youth movement in the Caribbean. I mean, when we had these first few outings in Barbados, in St. Vincent, in St. Kitts, we had some very strong national youth councils, on the basis of which we were able to come together. The secretariat of CFY was hosted at one time in St. Lucia, at another time in St. Vincent. We had persons with virtual full-time responsibilities to engage other national youth councils, keeping in touch with the programs and so on. But then the money started to dry up. I mean, I remember, just take the case of St. Lucia, I remember HEVOS, which is a Dutch organization, which, I mean, in the course of my presidency of the National Youth Council in St. Lucia, we got over $500,000 EC dollars from HEVOS to program over a period of 3 years. And I remember I can't remember his specific designation, but the person who linked with us from HEVOS said to me, the reality is the program area of youth has been deleted from the priorities of HEVOS. We're now looking at farming as the area that we're going to fund. And that's what happens sometimes. Agencies move on for whatever reason. Sometimes what's happening in the world, what's happening in the region, they decide, well, all right, we've invested enough in youth, let's move to something else. And that did happen to the councils and the regional body as well in the late 1990s and early 2000 period. And as I say, what the foundation that St. Lucia got, which enabled it to survive, a lot of others did not get that. CFY, even more so than the National Youth Councils, needed resources to survive, to be able to travel the islands, to be able to program for 9, 10 member countries together. In at the initial stages, we were able, okay, we have a conference in St. Kitts. We have 20 people from the different councils, names and Kitts, being able to pay their passages and their hotel accommodation or whatever through support we were getting from other agencies. After a while, that just simply dried up. So CFY did not have the wherewithal to continue. And even the councils, which were the foundation on which it was built, themselves started to demise. And the reality is CFY is simply, I believe the last president of CFY was actually the president of, at one time, of the St. Lucia National Youth Council, Ms. Veronica Snack. And I believe she has the unfortunate reputation of being the one under whom the council demised. But it simply was a question of funds and resources to keep it going. I'm trying to look at my scribbles and see if I could make them out. Not all I can make out. The new dispensation for organization of programs and activities, I still believe there's value and merit in some of the old style. In those years leading up to NYC St. Lucia, in those years, the early years of NYC in St. Lucia, I mean, going to every district, every community, all around the country, leaving office early to go to Dairy So in extreme south for a meeting at 5 o'clock and leaving there sometimes midnight, just grounding with young people, having the formal meetings, or sometimes just get the meeting finished, just sit down on the step outside and just rap and talk and hear the issues and concerns. I don't know that any social media platform can afford you that same thing. You know. That is the reality, and insofar as we just tell ourselves, okay, it's a new time, nobody needs to do that again, I think we still need to do it. I think it still has to happen if youth programming in the Caribbean is to be successful. I mean, in a sense, we have the advantage over some of the other territories that we still relatively small countries. We still have the capacity to virtually travel from north to south and east to west of most of these islands. And that is what I still believe must be done if you are to hold together the structures of youth organization.
Diaspora.
Yes, the diaspora in almost every facet right now, Caribbean countries are trying to link with the diaspora. Some countries have now established, offices for diaspora affairs and so on. I know in St. Lucia we have an ambassador who is an ambassador to the OECS and to the diaspora, specially brought in to deal with those issues and to connect with and contact the diaspora. And it's no different in the sector of youth than it is in the other spheres. I mean, we have so much of our talent outside of our countries and our regions, and it is really a waste of that talent, a waste of that resource to decide, well, you're living in the States, you're living in England, you're living wherever, so you're out of that. No, we can't afford that. We do not have that luxury to just take a whole set of our population, sometimes well-trained, sometimes well-experienced in matters, and to just decide your ways to stay out of things. We have to find the ways to engage the diaspora. And maybe that is where we have to use the social media platform much better. That is where we should make greater use of it, to keep in touch with our young people, wherever they are, our Caribbean young people, wherever they are located in the world. And as I say, that is where I would advocate for use, constant use of the social media platforms, rather than in the case of the mobilization of young people within the particular territories.
Yeah. So thank you very much again, Honourable Michel, for providing us with those responses. And at this time, I would like to invite Ms. Tonya Williams, to present a token of appreciation. And I'd like to invite Honourable Michel.
Oh, sorry, I
to
went
the
before
front.
you invited
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yes.
Youths, is it on?
Yes.
Youths do not need charity, but opportunity. Those are very memorable and strong words. Honourable Michel, thank you for taking us with you on a journey down memory lane and sharing with us all your wisdom over the years. You have certainly inspired and reminded us that as youths, we need to take our rightful place, seize all opportunities, and make an impact on the world around us. And I believe all of us younger youths have been left with one question. 3 or 4 decades from now, what do we want to be our legacy? Thank you again, Honourable Michel.
Yes. So at this time, we'll escort Honourable Michel to a more comfortable seat so that he can view a presentation by Andy McLaren.
All right. Good evening, everyone. All right. Everybody hear me? All right, cool. So we're here again. My name is Randy McLaren, and I'm just here to represent or to present the members who will be performing this evening from Articulate Edutainment. They'll be presenting a piece, an edu-drama called Birthday Talk, and it explores the issue of sexual violence and some more mother-daughter kind of situation. So I don't even know if I should say enjoy, but watch, and I hope you appreciate it. The actors this evening, Chantal Jackson and Shanique Brown. Please make them welcome. Just a minute or two to set the table.
Happy birthday. I made dinner and I got you a gift. Oh. Annie, can't you just sit down? It's your birthday. I'm trying here. Please, we hardly ever talk about anything. All you do is...
Leave it.
Well, honey, I can't
Don't call me honey.
Annie, I can't see.
Yes, you can.
Okay, yes, I can, but I just like to feel like there isn't a bag in the... special happen? Here is your gift. Aren't you going to open it?
Do I have to?
No. I'm trying here. Please, just talk to me.
Are we really doing this?
Yes!
Relax. No time for violence. Go meditate and leave me alone.
Honey, Annie, I'm sorry. I'm really trying to get to know you here. I'm trying to understand my daughter. Please, just help me. Talk to me, please.
Ask.
What?
Ask your questions.
And it's not a question and answer segment. Okay. How does it feel to be 18?
Same as yesterday. It's only been one day. Nothing has changed.
Okay. I know it's only been a day, but don't you feel... Okay, you're right. It's only been a day. You're like a woman. A little woman, no.
And here comes that awkward pause when mother tries to think carefully about how to ask the daughter what she knows about the birds and the bees.
No. I was...
I'm not a virgin.
Jesus.
You know that, right? I'm having sex. I smoke, mostly weed, sometimes both at the same time. All for fun. Safe. I know how to put on a condom and how to just have a nice time. Boyfriend? None. I'm too young to know what love is. Thanks to you. No. Is that all?
Annie, we're having dinner. And what is it? Talk to me. Don't you see me trying here? I put off everything today just to make sure that your day is special. Please. Talk to me. Please. I'm begging. Let's talk.
Justice.
What?
I want justice.
For? Just let it go.
Let it go? Why should I let it go? You just don't care, do you?
Of course I care. You're the only family I've got. Why wouldn't I care about you?
I don't know. You tell me.
You know what I need to tell you? I am your mother. And I am sick and tired of you talking to me the way you do. You have no idea how hard it is being a mother, being your mother. I have nobody to help me to make ends meet so that you can eat and buy those god-awful clothes you choose to wear.
Then go find Daddy.
Daddy. He's gone, Annie. I am all you've got, father and mother, whether you like it or not. And God knows I didn't have to carry you for those 9 months, but I did. So please don't let me regret it.
Should have let me die. I die every day when I think about it.
Dinner time. Let's eat.
How every day I try to tell myself that it wasn't my fault.
So, I found this recipe online. My first time trying it.
You're not my great, most likely to succeed cousin will pay for what he did.
It's chicken teriyaki and pasta with pork strips. I had the sausage on the side because I didn't have pork.
You know what's not easy, mother? Being a daughter without a father. Somebody who could have just protected me from the wicked boy. He raped me.
Keep your voice down there. So like I said, it's my first time trying it. So remember not to laugh. Dig in.
Yes. We were watching TV, laughing and chatting. Does it mean, dear cousin, I'm in love with you? You know, he told me I'd make a beautiful star one day. I could be anything I wanted to be. I felt inspired. But then he put on a movie that I didn't like. I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I needed to smile back at him when he kept smiling at me.
The juice.
I did not lead him on. I was 14. 14! I didn't know what the hell was happening. Just that his hands felt like cold slime running through my body. Relax, he said. This is normal.
This. I didn't make this. I tried to, but it turned out bad time to throw it away. This I got from the supermarket.
He eventually stopped. But not because he saw the tears running down my face, no. Because he felt like he had enough. Besides, he needed to go and pick up his girlfriend.
Let's put this away. You don't seem hungry.
Not once did you believe a word I said. I was just making a big deal out of something not so serious. I will never forgive him, never forgive you. You watched as my life slipped away from me and you wonder why? Why we hardly ever talk? Stop and listen to me. You wanted to talk, so let's talk. Why don't I have a father?
I don't know who your father is. He was wearing a mask the entire time. Tried to come up with an image as to what he would look like. Every time a man smiles at me, I wonder if that's him. Until you smile about it. So, I thought I'd keep this thing, this hate growing inside of me, and I'd turn it into something beautiful. And when you were born, I was convinced I'd made the right choice. And that bastard hurt you, and I couldn't deal with it, Annie. How could I face it? I feel your pain every single day, Annie. Every day. But I had to be strong. I had to be Superman. I'm weak, Annie. Weak. I'm weak.
We'll be all right, Mama. All right.
So that's Chantal and Shani. Give them another round of applause, please. Again, in 30 seconds. Huh? Oh, in 30 seconds, just to say thanks again to Doc and the committee for having us, being a part of this conference. What you've seen today and somewhat yesterday is what we'll be doing for the entire month of November, hopefully, which is Youth Month, going into schools, inviting schools to performances, you know, and going across the country to share with the young people in our island. This, we think, is the best way to connect with young people, or one of the best way to connect with young people and to really get the message, our messages out. So thanks again. Keep on doing the great work. Blessings.
Okay, so thanks again for that. Give yourselves a round of applause, yeah, for being patient. It has been a very long day, so we now invite you to reception to have cocktails with us. Have a good evening.